Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really thrilled to introduce you to her. She's been on Risk. She's been on the Story Collider. She's just fantastic. Her name is Edith Gonzalez. Please give her a warm welcome.
When I was in high school, I was a cheerleader. You might be able to tell. And I was also a mathlete. But I never quite was a cool kid, not in the beginning anyway. Mostly because our school did not have a football team, and also because it was an art school. So if you were in theater arts, you were the cool kid. So for the first 2 years, I was trying every after-school activity. I was in every show that they put on. I really wanted to move from the margins of being a cool kid, because I was right on the edge of it. But I couldn't quite transition into being fully cool. So I came in at the beginning of the school year, riding the Q32 bus in from Queens with my friend Kim. And she had heard over the summer what my issue was, why I wasn't actually being accepted into the cool group. And it was because I had a reputation of being a very good girl. And the coolest of the girls in my school was Blair. And she had like long black hair and flashing black eyes, like those bad gypsy eyes. And she was the coolest, and she had a reputation for just being wild. And nobody quite knew what that meant, but just a little bit wild. And I thought, how can I get that? Like, I need to do something. So that summer, I cut my hair really short, and I had this, picture it, it's the early 80s. I got this really cool David Bowie sort of androgynous haircut, and I thought, that could do it. And I got rid of my thick little Coke bottle glasses. I got some contact lenses. And I grew probably 6 inches that summer, so I came back and nobody knew who the hell I was. And I got into school, and so I started to just curse all the time, and I tried to smoke once, and I have asthma, and it was just a disaster. So I kept on with I did my trigonometry that semester, and perfect attendance and perfect score on my pre-PSATs, and I was just at a loss. And then one day, we're gonna call him Mark to preserve his identity. Mark was one of the cool guys, and he was in that cool group, and he had that sort of shoulder-length, feathered hair and a puka shell necklace, and he always wore these Led Zeppelin t-shirts or Who t-shirts, and he was very cool. And one day he said to me on the edge of this group, "Hey, what do you do in third period? You want to go hang out in the back of the theater?" Now that's code for do you want to go make out? Now, our school was different than other schools because it was basically a commuter school. It wasn't a neighborhood school. So kids were coming from all over New York City to go to the school. So there was not a lot of hanging out that happened after school. If you wanted to hang out with someone and see someone, they might live in a completely separate borough from you. So hanging out with kids after school was not a thing. So you were always looking to cut class and hang out. When he said third period, I was like, yes, because that's when I had gym. And as head cheerleader, I was excused from gym, so I wouldn't even get a demerit for cutting class. So I was like, yeah, internal good girl score. Bad girl reputation, yes. So I found myself third period sneaking in. Now, the auditorium, the theater of the school, had a broken door. The kids had broken one of the doors to get into the auditorium. So you could always sneak in there and hide backstage. And so I found myself third period going into the theater, and it was always open. There was no way to lock it. So I snuck in, and I'm going through a dark theater, tiptoeing down the aisles. And I get to the stage and trying not to be clumsy or trip over anything. And I get onto the stage, and I get backstage, and it's just those tiny little backstage lights that prevent people from, like tripping over scenery or stuff between acts. And he's there, and there's this big old disgusting couch that's behind, and exactly what you think it's for, that's what it's for. And we're there, and so we start standing there, and we start kissing, and then he sort of pulls me down onto the couch, and we start kissing on the couch. And I think, how many girls has he cut class with and made out back here, backstage? A lot, I'm sure, because he seemed like he had a lot of practice at this. So I think, how am I gonna make a bad girl impression if he's back here kissing all these girls all the time? So I stand up really quickly, and he sort of leaps up too, and he's like, did I do something? Are you okay? And I'm like, I'm fine. And I grab the edge of the couch, and I start to yank the couch as hard as I can, and it's screeching and scratching across the stage, the wooden stage, and I begin to pull the couch to the middle of the stage. And the curtains are open. And I go back to the lighting board and click on one spotlight, whoosh, onto the couch. In a darkened house, just the lit couch on stage. And I go stand over there, and I wait for him. And he comes walking over. And as he's walking over, he's taken off his Led Zeppelin t-shirt. And he gets to the couch, and I pull him down onto the couch, and then we're making out on the couch, lit on stage in this theater with a broken door. And he pulls me down on top of him, and all I can think of is my friend Kim on the Q60 bus, the one we have to take home. Now, I'm completely inexperienced at this point. She has had a boyfriend for a year, and even though she's still a virgin, she has a whole lot more experience than I do. And she has been giving me sex tips in a very loud voice on the back of the Q60 bus going back to Queens every day for about 6 months, preparing me for my moment as a bad girl. And I think I'm gonna give him a blowjob right here, right now. So I kind of crawl on top of him, we're making out on the couch, and I start kissing him down all over and I'm trying to get his jeans open in probably the least sexy way you've ever seen in your life. The belt comes off, the buttons come, I'm sort of like yanking at him and like get his jeans down just enough, and I kiss down his chest, and I begin to attempt this act, and all I can think is my friend Kim's advice in her voice in my head, giving me the instructions, which are, make sure your teeth are covered. Make sure your mouth is very moist. I begin to do this, and then I remember, wait a minute, you're supposed to remind him, he's supposed to tell you when he's about to have an orgasm before you start this. So I pull away, and as I pull away and say, hey, he goes, and climaxes all over his chest, all over his puka shell necklace, all over his feathered hair, and just then the bell rings, and I think, I have to get to calculus. So I leap up, grab my book bag, leave the auditorium, and off I go. And I think, I don't know, was that bad enough? And I'm waiting for him like the next week to see how things go. And I'm hanging out on the edge of the cool kids, and I'm feeling like, yeah, that's right. I did that. Yes, I am a bad girl now. I may not smoke, and I may have a perfect attendance record in calculus, but I am definitely a bad girl now. And somehow, I make this transition to the cool kids. But what I realized very shortly after that is he never told anyone. And that my transition to the cool kids came about with perhaps my newfound confidence in self to be able to follow directions in the heat of the moment. About 20 years later, I was in a Starbucks. And this guy with really nice hair, still looking a little rock and roll, comes up and is like, "Hey, hi." And I was like, "Holy crap. We're gonna call him Mark. It's Mark from high school. Hey, hi, how you doing?" And we talk for less than 30 seconds when he says, "Do you remember that day in the auditorium when we cut school when you came?" I was like, "Yes, I do remember that day." He said, "I have to tell you, that was the most erotic experience of my life." And up to that point, I had been planning to go into graphic design, but I had never really considered sex as performance before. And I've spent the last 20 years producing porn. So if you need a career counselor, I am available.
Oh God, that's my new best friend, Edith Gonzalez. Wow. Fantastic.